Alrighty, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you all for joining the Wellbeing Week webinars presented by Affinity Federal Credit Union. Today's topic is emotional well-being. My name is Nicholas Battagliano, and I am the Wellbeing Communication Specialist here at Affinity. Today's presenter is Izzy Smelkinson, LSW. She is a licensed social worker with a master's degree from Rutgers School of Social Work. While attending Rutgers, Izzy focused on studies on working with adolescents, trauma, and bolstering self-esteem. She currently works at Robert Wood Johnson University Hospital, Somerset, as an inpatient therapist for eating disorder unit. As a reminder, this webinar is being recorded, and the link to watch the presentation, again, will all be shared with you in a follow-up email that we sent out soon. Also, if you have any questions during the presentation, feel free to use the Q&A option on your panel, and we'll be more than happy to address them at the end of the webinar. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Again, my name's Izzy. I'm super happy to be here. And I'm going to share my screen in just a moment so that we can get started talking a little bit about stress management. Hold on one moment. Okay. I want to say first, my experience on the eating disorder unit really colors my idea of how we take care of ourselves. And especially knowing that now is a big time of stress, right? That it's important that we talk about what stress is, what it does to the body, and how we can best take care of ourselves in times of high stress, right? What is stress, right? So stress is the body's physiological response to external stimuli, but uh, it's like a cortisol shot right to the brain. So all these different systems, endocrine, reproductive, the nervous system, kind of, it's all that fight or flight response coming into our bodies. And what is a stress stimuli? It can really be anything, right? So there's stressors of work stressors, family, really anything that you encounter can bring you stress. And so that's why it's important to know what kind of happens to us. So there's different types of stress. You've got the acute stress and you've got chronic stress. So acute stress is those short bursts of stress, right? That sort of instant fight or flight that comes up. So that's, say, you're driving in a car and someone is coming towards you. That fight or flight will come to take care of you, to say, oh, okay, that stress response starts to say, I have to put my foot on the brake to make sure that no one, gets in a car accident here. And that can be acute stress. Now, chronic stress is the ongoing repetitive nature of stress. And so that can very quickly lead to a burnout response. So chronic stress is when we have that fight or flight response, like we're going to get in a car accident, but that it is occurring over and over and over again. So our body systems don't know whether or not we're going to get in a car accident or have a bear attack or anything like that. It just has that instant response. And so it's really useful when we may be in danger, but it can be really detrimental when it's ongoing and it doesn't know, our bodies don't know that the reason we have this stress is due to maybe it's sitting at our computer, right? And so our body is still responding in that way, but that the stimuli is different. We want to make sure our body's stress matches the stimuli coming towards us. And chronic stress can lead to burnout. So if we continue to experience stressful things and our body continues to have that fight or flight response, it will eventually tire from having too much of those chemicals and will collapse, right? Fatigue. So is really so bad, right? So this is all of the things that can happen with chronic stress, just some of the things. So chronic stress and the impact of it, it is a whole system issue. Again, when I say that my experience on the eating disorder unit shapes what I know about stress and how to take care of it, similarly, they're a full body issue, and eating disorders are something that comes, they're a stressor. And so you can see similar things with just regular stress. So you can have things like fibromyalgia, weakened immune systems, right? Those respiratory issues, chronic respiratory, because our body isn't producing or is overproducing certain hormones, it affects the entire system. We often like to think that we can separate our brain and the rest of our body from things. However, that is unfortunately not the case. And so even if we're saying, I have some mental stress here, I feel it in my brain, I have a headache or whatever, that it's a whole system issue when we talk about the endocrine system and other things. I know we keep saying it, but it's the whole body is impacted. And that's why it's important that we talk about these things and that we're aware of it, because you might be having symptoms of something that you didn't even know might be related to stress or exacerbated by stress. So say you have IBS, right? Or acid reflux, but you're still doing those, having those stressors in your life. You may have completely changed, the way you eat or what medications you take, but it might be exacerbated by stress. So it's important that we look at it before things get to an irreversible place so that we know how to best manage it. Um, so what do we do about stress, right? So I guess a question I have, and I know we're kind of webinaring, right, is what do we do about stress already? So I view stress and what we do about stress in two different camps. Okay. So if we look here, I call them, and pardon my language, this is the way I learned, is you've got self-care, right? So hold on. You've got self-care. Now there's a couple of different kinds of self-care. You've got sexy self-care and unsexy self-care. Okay, so sexy self-care is all of the stuff that everybody hears about, right? All the stuff we know about, bubble baths and face masks and hobbies, retail therapy, yoga, right, retreats, all of those wonderful things that feed the soul, but that have sort of a short-term impact. Right, they're the things that we can market as self-care. That is us taking care of ourselves. We've taken a weekend to read and restore. And that is, of course, very useful and very helpful, right? Those daily routines, right? Going to your yoga class or going on a walk and a run, aside from lowering your cortisol levels, your fight or flight, and reducing stress, right? There's other bodily systems that helps. So I'm not saying that sexy self-care isn't helpful. It is, of course, very helpful. Um, then you've also got unsexy self-care. So unsexy self-care is all the things that we do on a daily basis to genuinely care for ourselves, right? So you've got doing the laundry and doing the dishes, showering, brushing your teeth, right? Taking care of all of those base needs that you have, eating, sleeping appropriately, right? Getting the right amount of sleep for your body, the right amount of nutrition for your body is really, really important for managing your stress levels. If you don't have, say you have lots of stressors, work stressors, family, you're not sleeping appropriately or giving your body what it needs, that fight or flight system that's already in place, right? All those hormones coming in without the proper kind of, I would say, kind of like house plants. So, if a house plant doesn't get the food and water and sunshine it needs, it starts to wilt. We're very similar. So if we've got all that stress, we're not taking care of ourselves, we can start to collapse, right? We want to make sure we can keep our motor going. But I'll also say that unsexy self-care goes a bit deeper than that. Okay, so unsexy self-care is also about setting boundaries, communicating effectively, and putting ourselves first. Okay, so that's what I call like the hard stuff, right? So if unsexy self-care, as I say, is the hard stuff, this is the like extra hard stuff that works to help reduce our stress response. So how do we do that, right? Knowing that this is the hard stuff. So there are many different types of boundary, right? So if we see here in front of us, we've got 7 different types, right? There's some of which I think we know of already, or can say, oh, right, that's definitely a boundary we have. And some are a little bit trickier to tap into. So you've got your physical boundaries, right? That's physical space. If someone interferes into your personal physical space, you can know when they cross that boundary. You've got your emotional boundaries. So that's like if you don't feel safe or comfortable to share your feelings, right? If someone invalidates you, that could be a breaking of your boundary. Your intellectual boundaries, that's like, again, it can be invalidation, but it can also be, say you're at work and you had a great idea and somebody took that idea. They would then be like, you've said it to them and they relay it to your boss. That can put a type of stress on you because they've just then uh, crossed your intellectual boundary. That's your intellectual property. You've got time boundaries, right? Making sure that you have the appropriate, you're doing things at the appropriate time for you, right? If your schedule is 9 to 5 and your boss wants you to do more, they're crossing your boundary for your time. Say you've got to be in 2 different places at once, but you don't know how to do that, right? Is you have to figure out, excuse me, what your time boundary is. The material is going to be your property, things that you have. If someone were to break things, right, they're crossing your material boundary. And spiritual is if, you've whatever your faith or belief is, someone is coming and telling you you're wrong, right? And validating your own religious experience or spiritual experience. And again, the last one here, those sexual boundaries, which are boundaries that we all have to talk about all the boundaries. And sexual boundaries, we can gather it's when people cross your physical line in terms of sex. And that can be a huge boundary cross, right? So when we talk about the different types of boundaries, there's also several different ways that boundaries can present. So for all 7 different boundaries, you can have porous boundaries, rigid boundaries, or flexible boundaries. So a porous boundary is going to be, that's sort of, you always say yes to things. I like to envision it kind of like, it's a beautiful like circle. Everything's coming in towards you, right? So if you're in open space and you just say yes, 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 kind of like that movie Yes Man, you're always saying yes to things. If someone asks you to do more, you give them your time. You're very open. So let's say you meet someone and immediately they're your best friend, right? That's a pretty porous boundary because you're introducing that level of trust before you know it's there. There's more likelihood that they could be, breaking some of your boundaries or taking advantage. That's that porous place. Whereas a rigid is the exact opposite, right? You can be very closed off or say no to everything. Those are the other pieces of it where there's that no flexibility in things. So it's yes, your way or the highway, things like that. And then that flexible piece is that beautiful marriage of the two, being able to acknowledge, okay, this is my time, this is my boundary, and how do I work with you to find mine? Yes, we've also got, there's some other boundaries. We've got, financial, relational, right? How do we set boundaries within our own family or with finances, things like that. So having talked about these different types of boundary, porous, rigid, flexible, okay, how do I do that then, right? If we're saying that being able to, the stress management at the core of it is setting good and firm boundaries for yourself because that's that other side of self-care. Okay, sure, that's easy to say. What do I do about it, right? And so here we've got a couple different ways of communicating, all right? Um, and so Dear Man here is a DBT skill, which is dialectical behavioral therapy. It's a type of therapy that you can use, but what Dear Man stands for is an acronym, okay? And so this is where setting those hard boundaries is going to come in. So Dear Man is the D stands for describe. So what we're going to do, say someone comes up to you and I like the work analogy, right? So if someone comes up to you and they ask you to, let's say someone quit their job, right? And you are being asked to take on their workload, but you already have a full workload. How do you express yourself in that way? How do you say that's actually not gonna work for me? So the D in Dear Man is describe, right? So you're going to lay out the facts, right? We want to separate our emotions entirely from this at this point in time. So we want to let the other person know, okay, you want me to come in very factual, okay? Exactly the thing that you're reacting to. And then we want to express our feelings, but we want to use those I statements. And so I feel when you, right? I'm feeling as though this is, I'm being taken advantage, whatever that might be, right? We don't want to ever assume someone knows where we're coming from because I'm on my journey and you're on yours, and they might not know what's going on with you. So being able to express yourself and clearly and specifically from an I feel place can be really helpful. Often if we come from a you did or I need or whatever that might be, the other person can get more rigid. We don't know what their boundaries are. And so we want to come from an open place. Okay. That A is for assert yourself. Okay. So you get to say, right, what you need, and you get to say it assertively. Oh, pardon me. We've got a little medical response. Okay. Because people can't read our minds. So we need to assert the thing that we want. We want to do it calmly and firmly. Okay. And the R is that reinforce. We want to reward the person by explaining the positives that might happen as opposed to what those negatives might be. So, like, let's say, uh, again, with the work situation, okay, you want me to come in and do this extra. I already have, all of this workload. I feel really overwhelmed by that right now. And so at this moment in time, I can't do that. However, if you are able to accommodate me for the weekend, I will be able to do XYZ when my workload has gotten easier, right? It's that way of saying, I'm going to assert this boundary at this moment in time. This isn't possible for me. However, right, if we're able to work through this, here's what I can do, right? Here's that reward. Um, that M is for mindful, okay? So the second piece of this is that we want to be mindful of the things that we're asking about. And we want to stay on task and on target with the thing that we're asking for. So we don't necessarily like say there's more than one thing that we are um, upset about, right? Whether that be family function, whatever, that we want to stay on task. So we want to bring up other things that are bothering us. So we want to stay mindful of where we are, who we're talking to, what we're talking about, so that we don't lose sight of what it is that we're trying to express. That A is for appear confident. Okay. So part of this, and this is a little silly because it's almost like, have you ever seen like power pose or anything like that? I like to think of this like a verbal power pose. So even if we don't feel confident in what we're asking, even if we feel apologetic, we don't feel certain of what that answer is going to be, we want to make sure that when we are talking about it, that we are asserting confidence, right? We are, there's this wonderful quote. It's like, no matter if you think you're capable or not capable, or ready or not ready, you're right. So if you think you're confident, you're right. If you think you're not confident, you're also right. So if you're able to go in, maybe you have to hype yourself up beforehand, right? Say, okay, this is what I'm doing with my family, with my mom, at work, whatever. That if you remember, okay, I've got this, this is okay, that's going to be really useful for you. And that N is for negotiate, right? Be willing to give and in order to get. So again, kind of like when I went back with reward, that negotiate is, okay, this is my boundary here. Okay. I work from this time to this time. I have to go do XYZ at another time. So I can't do it today. However, I can do it at a later time. Or, today I can't see you in person, mom, but I can give you a phone call. Being able to work within your boundaries and also someone else's boundaries, right? So it's really about coming in with openness, and with kindness, for yourself, and to remember that, like, ideally we're all going to get on the same page, right? So being able to express ourselves in an effective way using this dear man strategy can be really, really helpful. Now, again, I'm not saying that we don't know what anyone else is going to do or say, right? So we can't control someone else's response. But if we come with our boundaries set and with our own, tools here to prop ourselves up and to express ourselves effectively, that's what we can do. People can't come back at us and say, hey, you hurt my feelings in this such way because you came and very calmly laid out all your boundaries. Now, naturally, when we talk about boundary setting, and especially as it relates to stress management, right, that our boundaries tend to slip when we're feeling more stressed. And that's why it's important to practice them before things get like really, really hard. So one of the things that I very often say is, your body is going to do what it's going to do. So whether we want to take the break now or later, um, if our body's already starting to feel that stress response come in, that chronic stress response, setting those boundaries sooner rather than later is going to be that effective piece for you, because practice is what's going to make this really impactful. So if we set our boundaries, and even if we set our boundaries like, set our boundaries with someone that we feel comfortable setting boundaries with, so that we can practice them in a safe environment before, you can bring out dear man, practice that before you bring it to someone that maybe is intimidating or you don't feel comfortable with how they may answer or respond. That way you've got that under your belt. You've done this with your partner or your best friend, someone that you feel comfortable and confident will respond in a good way, so that you're like, oh, this is fine. I've had the practice. I know what to do. Excuse me. Now, fair fighting on the other side, right? We want to fight fair. So even though we bring dear man into, our lives, and we try to be as calm and effective communicators as possible, it's not always, fights are not always avoidable, right? So because we all come from different backgrounds and have different perspectives on things, so when we do fight, we want to fight fair. All right, and so a lot of the things we talk about with dear man are also, they are also part of fighting fair, right? Coming with I statements and making sure that you assert yourself in a calm and collected way. One of the other really important things of fighting fair is you don't want to stonewall, right? You want to make sure that when you do have these sort of, collisions in boundary, that we're listening to the other person, and making sure that we're actively listening, so that we can then respond from a place of, I feel this way, that's not necessarily how I see it. How do we find that compromised place, right? Reducing that interpersonal stress can be helpful because it sets us up in other avenues, right? Though we don't really want to fight, right, with our bosses or coworkers, that if we come from a place where, again, we practice or interpersonally, that we can fight fair. We don't have to bring our walls up, right? One of the other important things of fighting fair is to, one of the other important things for fighting fair, aside from stonewalling, is to, pardon me, my brain just short circuited. Oh, is to make sure that we don't leave. Okay. So we can take small breaks if we say, you know what, this is a boundary of mine. I'm feeling a really high emotion right now. I need 10 minutes, 20 minutes, and then we come back and we continue the conversation. Okay. So if we are feeling really high emotions, intense things, and we're feeling like we want to pick fights and say mean things or do things, we want to say, and this is part of that setting that boundary. You know what? I can't do this right now. Let's set a time. We are coming back to this. And that's really important because that means that, again, everyone can get on the same page and you get to work towards those compromise pieces, those second pieces. And what that also does is when we remove ourselves from a situation and don't come back to it, a stressful situation, that stress doesn't go away. It just kind of lays dormant. So and this is something I talk about often with feelings as well, and especially here on the unit, but it is very much the same when it comes to stress. If we have had hard conversations or stressful things go on and we ignore that stress, we don't make any of those changes, we don't address the stress, our body knows that. Our body remembers absolutely everything. And so even if our brains aren't remembering it, our body is going to hold on to that stress until we are able to take care of ourselves, have those conversations, and address the problem. So it's important that we take breaks if we need them. I mean, and that's not just with fighting. It is important to take breaks if we need them. Okay. Okay. And so my last, aside from effective communication, the other piece of self-care for stress management is you, remembering that you are a very important piece of this. So you want to put yourself first. Listen to your body, what it is saying to you, what does it need? Because you are the only person who knows your body the way that you do, right? Nobody else is in your head or in your system. And so being able to tune inward and say, oh, even if you're working, I'm hungry right now. I have to go eat a snack. Oh, I have to go to the bathroom. Go to the bathroom, right? The work will still be there. Your loved one will still be there. Everything will still be okay when you return, but you have to go to the bathroom, right? These are those fundamental things like houseplants that we need to do in order to, take care of our stress levels. Um, we want to give ourselves grace, because I think another important thing, and this is a little bit more, in terms of stress management, but giving ourselves grace for not always getting it right, and to acknowledge all of the good things you're doing, all the steps you're taking towards managing your stress or reducing your stress, right? Or even if it's you're at a job and you don't feel like you're doing a good job, right? Or your boss has never told you that, and that's providing you some stress. If you're able to take 5 minutes out of your day and write down 3 things that went well for you, specifically in the work environment, or if it's similar like a family member, right? You feel as though someone's always invalidating you. What are 3 things that you did well in an interaction with them so that you're able to look back and say, oh, hold on. I got this, because it's very, very easy as people to forget the things that we bring and to ignore all of the positives and to only focus on those negatives. So it's like I used to do roses and thorns. However, I like to do just roses these days, right? It's so easy to know what our thorns are for the day. What are the bad things that happen? Our roses are all those good things. And so if we're able to acknowledge even just 3, that can be really, really helpful. I also, joyful, mindful movement can be really, really helpful as well, right? We all know that moving our body is an important piece for stress management and self-care. But sometimes exercise can be a huge stressor, right? And again, I'm someone here, I'm on the eating disorder unit. Food and exercise are huge, huge stressors. And so one of the ways that you can work with your body, knowing that they're also important for your own care, especially food, is to do things that you enjoy and to eat things that you enjoy. Um, Again, to give yourself that grace to say, you know what, today I don't want to go on a marathon. I don't want to run the New York Marathon. Today I need to take maybe a walk around the neighborhood slowly, or I like to dance around my kitchen when I make dinner, right? That those small things are not actually small. They are huge, huge steps towards reducing your stress levels, taking care of your body, and making sure your whole system is working effectively. Um, and then, it's hard, tough work. Like I tell everyone here, all of this stuff is so, so hard. But that even when it comes to food, being able to give yourself grace about certain things, whether let's say you're on a diet for, even if it's health reasons or otherwise, to say, you know what, I gave myself, my body was asking for something that a fun food that I wanted, I gave it to myself, as opposed to saying like, oh man, I shouldn't have done that, right? Trying to give yourself the care that you would want to give your best friend or the love of your life, things that are going to be really, really helpful to reduce that stress. though there are all those external stresses, I do believe that there is a lot of internal stress we put on ourselves. So remembering that you're the most important piece of your health and your stress journey is super useful. And the last is to build your support system, your family, whether that be family, friends, chosen family, therapists, right? Professionals who are there to help support you. I think that is really instrumental. Stress loves, we love to isolate and get rid of all of those things that take care of us, all those self-care tools. When we are able to express that we're feeling stressed to those around us and to say, this is what I need today and express that out, it gets out of our body, out of our brains and into the universe, and it all becomes a little bit less hard to deal with. Anxiety, right? Anxiety is one of those things that can definitely come up with stress, especially because anxiety gets more heightened when you don't eat or take care of yourself in certain ways. And anxiety is one of those things that when you get it out on paper, it gets a little better. So it's very similar when we talk about stress. So write down those things that are stressing you out, right? Write anything. Get it out of your brain onto paper into a place where you feel like you can manage it. And the last thing, when I talk about professionals too, I am someone who is of the belief that anyone and everyone would benefit from therapy. Now, I am biased. I am a therapist. I'm a social worker. But I still believe that. And that is because, even though there's a lot of thought that, therapy is when we have a problem, therapy can also be used for maintenance. So if you find someone that you like to talk to who maybe has a different perspective than those around you, or who understands you in a different way, that is impartial. A therapist is they don't know any of your family, they don't know your work life, they don't know your friends, they only know what you bring them. And that can be really beneficial to have someone that you can talk to, bounce ideas off of, and also someone who has that, education background to be able to root you in other things that might be helpful for you. Um, so that is definitely something that I think is important. Okay, so I do see some questions, and I can kind of roll through them now if that works. So, um, well, I kind of said, right, when we want to seek professional help for stress management, I think if you have the thought that you might need to seek professional help for stress management, that means that's the time, right? It goes along with listening to your body, what your body is saying. It's so much easier to come back from a little bit not good than it is to come back from the ground floor, right? So say we're so stressed, we're so stressed, we're so stressed, and we don't take care of it, right? We have those warning signs, but we ignore the warning signs. That eventually that can lead to complete burnout. It can lead to, you know, the I've always been told that anyone under a significant amount of stress can have like a psychotic break or need serious, mental health care. And so knowing that, right, that anyone at any point can experience something like this, we want to make sure that if we're starting to feel some of those cracks come out, we take care of them. We can be proactive about this stuff. That's going to be really, really helpful because it also means you have more time to practice. If these are new skills, new things, if self-care doesn't come naturally to you, being able to practice those skills when we're feeling less stressed or stressed but not so stressed, it means that when those really big times of stress come in, and even like acute stress or things that become more and more chronic, you have the practice to go into your tool belt and say, okay, I know what the things are that help me. I know that I need to go to my weekly yoga class. I know I have to do the laundry at this time because if everything starts piling up, I'm going to feel worse. But we don't always know that if we don't practice that beforehand. Um, let's see. Effective strategies for managing stress in the workplace, especially in a high pressure environment. So, one of the things that can be really helpful with managing stress in the workplace is schedule. So, and I am someone who doesn't always love a schedule, I find them hard to stick to, but in a high pressure environment where things are going on all the time, it's so helpful to be able to know what you're doing at any given moment. And also, then you get to say to whomever might be asking, this is what I'm doing here, right? One of the important pieces when we talk about Dear Man and setting boundaries is being able to say, no, I can't. So if you look at your schedule in that high pressure environment or you have a lot going on, you are able to say, no, I can't do that right now, and be able to listen to yourself. Another thing that's important is to know that, like, there is no, this is a little, there is no like work to continue to do if you aren't there, if that makes any sense. So if chronic stress leads to all of these health challenges, and we continue to see them and we don't do anything to work on the stress and it brings more health challenges and more health challenges, we can't do the work if we're no longer able to. Our body's going to do what it's going to do. So if we're able to, again, tune in and set that no boundary, say, I can't do that right now, maybe at another time, that we can start that process of being able to say, okay, and I will be here next week because I've taken care of myself this week, right? And that's a hard thing, I think, for people to grasp in a workplace environment. But if you start to set those boundaries, that hopefully it can permeate throughout the environment, right? We can only control our responses, our reactions, and the things that we do. But if we're able to set our boundaries and in a confident way, that's wonderful, right? That's excellent. That's how we get to keep those boundaries, in place. Um, how do things like diet, exercise, and sleep influence stress? Are there specific lifestyle changes that are particularly effective? So, again, I feel like I'm in a unique position here on the eating disorder unit. So, diet, exercise, and sleep really impact stress. So, if you, and especially sleep, I will say. So, and again, I'm not a medical doctor, I'm a social worker, I'm not a dietitian, but I feel like I've learned some things from people here. So, without a proper amount of sleep and without our proper nutrition, our bodies start to just shut down, right? It's like if you were ever in middle school at a um, if you were ever in middle school at a sleepover party and you stayed up the whole night and the next day you went home to your mom and you crashed on the floor, it's very similar if we don't get our sleep as adults. So we need to get those 7, 8 hours so that our brain can function properly, and not even just our brain. If we don't sleep properly, we can even sometimes have cardiac issues or other things like that. It's super important that those base functions that we need to live are there. Lack of sleep can also cause anxiety, depression, other mental health issues that we don't even think are often related to that. And then if you couple that with, oh, I had less sleep today, so I doubled up my caffeine, well, that could be a recipe for disaster too, because caffeine can make you more anxious, right? Stimulates that. And so then you've got this cycle of, well, I'm anxious because I didn't sleep. I'm starting to have chest pains and I had all this coffee. Like, it's a cycle. So it's super important that we sleep. And similar with diet and exercise. So when we talk about nutrition, and that's really eating, a balance of things, because it is just as important to eat those things that are good for the soul, especially when we talk about stress, as it is to eat things that are good to keep your body functioning. because if anyone has the time or is interested, there's a wonderful book called Intuitive Eating, all about listening to what your body wants so that you can understand what your cues are saying, what your body is saying to yourself that you need. And a lot of that is, if you want chocolate and your body's asking for it, if you don't give it that chocolate, that might still cause some stress on you, right? We're totally ignoring what our body is telling us. um, but additionally, without proper nutrition, something I've learned while being here is that without proper nutrition, if we're eating below what we need or not getting what we need, that our body will find ways to get it what it needs. And what that looks like is your body organs, those things, they're looking for food and they will start to eat themselves as a form of food. And so knowing that, right, that's another thing that can cause these chronic health issues, autoimmune diseases. You can have hair loss from not eating enough, right? These are all factors of stress. I kind of view stress as this all-encompassing thing. And so being able to, again, listen to ourselves, give our body what it needs, diet, exercise, and sleep wise, will just kind of naturally be able to cope with more stress. If we're not eating an appropriate amount of food to keep our bodies moving with energy and sustenance, it will start to slow down and we won't be able to handle the stress anymore. If it was something that was manageable, we'll start to just kind of break down, and it can be slow, but the body feels that stress, even if our brain doesn't. Similarly with exercise, like I said, joyful, mindful movement. Often we can feel stressed about a certain body goal or exercise goal or something like that. And it's important to, like, I know I keep saying listen to your body, but if your body wants to go on a 5 mile run, do it. And if one day you wake up and it is not what you want, you can give yourself the kindness to say, oh, not today, right? We talk about rest days and things like that being important for your body's functioning, especially if you're in the gym quite often, but it's also important for your mental health, being able to give yourself the rest that you need and give yourself permission to rest in whatever capacity that is. Whether that's from someone else or something else, that's what's going to, effectively help reduce the stress. And as far as it goes with specific lifestyle changes that are particularly effective, I think that is something that it's so individualized, right? Being able to tune into what your needs are on any given day, that's what's going to help. Yes, eating your vegetables, getting your nutrients in, right? Your grains and your fiber and all of that is going to help the system work. Taking a half-hour walk every day, getting your sunshine, that is proven to be helpful. But and your 8 hours, those are things that we all have been taught since we were kids. These are the things that are going to help our bodies function and help us reduce our stress levels. But it's also so individual to what it is that you need, your body needs, like your life, all of that. So it feels a little open-ended to say, that it's about setting boundaries both with yourself and other people. That there is that piece of sexy self-care, those things that we like to do to take care of ourselves, and get that manicure, do that face mask, play those video games, because that's just as important as taking care of your daily functioning, your daily functions, and saying no. These are all things that help reduce stress. It's like being able to keep that even balance and live in that gray area where we're not perfect. That's what's going to help reduce daily stress. And it takes some time, and it's a long process, and it's not always the easiest. It can be very challenging, especially when we're setting boundaries with people who aren't used to us setting boundaries. They are going to have their own response to those boundary sets. But it is, yeah, it's very, very helpful and important in the long term to do all of these base functions so that you don't have a break or a barrier when things get really, really high stress. So if anyone had any other questions, I'll answer them. That's it for me.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Izzy. That was such amazing information that you shared today. And thank you everyone for joining today. We'll be sending out this follow-up email with the recording for you guys to all view again if you'd like. And of course, please join us for the rest of the week for the in-person as well as the webinars that we touch on financial, career, and community well-being. Thank you, everyone, and have a great rest of your day.